The air inside the broken space station was thick with smoke and sparks. Alarms screamed from every corner, warning of hull breaches, power failures, and falling oxygen levels. Elias Grant, a human soldier in a torn exosuit, ducked behind a twisted metal beam, blood dripping from his shoulder. He had the stolen data core in his bag, his mission nearly complete, but now he was surrounded. Blaster fire hissed past his head, burning holes into the walls. Alien voices shouted orders nearby. Cold and sharp, he pulled out a small mirror and peeked around the corner. At least 3 alien warriors were sweeping the corridor. One of them was massive, armored in dark red plates and moving with deadly precision. "This is bad," Elias muttered to himself, gripping his rifle. His leg trembled. Not from fear, but from the wound near his thigh. He didn't have much time. He had to reach the evac shuttle docked 2 levels down, but now even crawling felt impossible then. Out of nowhere, an explosion rocked the level, the ceiling above cracked, and debris rained down. Elias barely rolled aside, coughing as smoke poured in, and in that moment of chaos he saw her. An alien female, wounded, her left arm bleeding greenish-blue blood, stumbled from the opposite end of the hallway. Her eyes met his for half a second, glowing a fierce amber. Filled with heightened fear, it was Sari of Clan Vecna, a name known to humans as the Ghostblade. She was one of the elite, warrior trained from birth to fight and kill humans without mercy. They both raised their weapons, but the floor gave out beneath them, a deafening crack and then darkness. They fell through the broken deck, crashing into a lower level filled with old machinery, dust, and silence. The station's autolock engaged, sealing the collapsed zone behind them. Coughing, bruised, and trapped, both stared at each other. Their weapons had been lost during the fall. They slowly stood up, limping, barely able to move, but still staring with mistrust and rage. Elias took a step back, hand raised slightly. "I don't want to fight," he said through clenched teeth. Sari didn't answer, but her posture shifted, her hand gripping her injured side. Then a robotic voice echoed through the chamber. "Biosigns detected. Initiating emergency." Healing protocol. A hidden panel in the wall opened, revealing a dual-species healing, paddled, dusty, but still functional, before they could react. The floor beneath their feet shifted again, tilting toward the pod. A security system kicked in, scanning both of them, and the pod doors opened with a hiss. Neither had time to escape. They were pushed by the tilting floor and locked inside together. Bright lights surrounded them. The pod's automed AI began scanning their bodies. "Warning," the robotic voice said. "Mixed species detected, initiating bonding sync to stabilize vitals." What did it say? Elias shouted, confused and already feeling the pod's needles enter his skin. Sari growled, trying to stand, but the pod's harness locked her down gently. Energy fields formed around them, pulsing with blue light. Their minds began to blur. Elias gasped suddenly. Memories that weren't his flashed behind his eyes. A burning forest, alien children running, her brother screaming. Sari saw something to his sister crying. Hiding inside a bunker as bombs fell outside, they both screamed, eyes wide, unable to move. "What's happening?" Elias cried out, his voice shaking. Sari hissed through clenched teeth. "It's merging us, our pain, our past. This isn't healing, it's bonding." The pod was designed for creatures of the same kind. This was never meant to happen. But now, their injuries were fading slowly, bones aligning, nerves reconnecting. And all the while, their thoughts tangled like wires, messy and impossible to control. Inside that small pod, the two enemies lay side by side, breathing heavy, skin glistening with sweat. They were no longer just two strangers. They were feeling each other's pain and memories like they had lived the same life. Silence fell inside the pod, broken only by the soft hum of the healing systems. Then Elias whispered, "You hate humans, don't you?" Sari turned her head slightly toward him, her voice cold. "Do you blame me?" "Your kind burned my world." He didn't answer, but the bond between them pulsed, sharing his guilt and her sorrow in equal weight. In that moment, neither moved. They just stared into the dim lights above, trapped in a healing pod that refused to let go, forcing two enemies to share not just space, but soul. Outside, the battle still raged, but in that pod, something else had begun. Not peace, not yet, but something dangerous, something that could change everything. The pod lights dimmed. But the energy between them grew stronger. Elias blinked, his vision swirling with flashes of color and images not his own. He saw Sari as a child, training with a long spear under the red sun of her homeworld. He felt the sting of her failures, the praise of her father, and the day she buried her brother's blade after a human strike burned her village. Sari clenched her fists, her body still shaking. She felt Ilias's memories to his sister laughing beside him, both of them hiding under a table during a surprise birthday. And then the blast, the fire, the rubble. She felt the way his hands dug through broken stone, screaming her name, even as the air filled with smoke. They weren't talking now. They didn't need to. Every breath pulled in emotions from the other. Every heartbeat seemed shared. The pod system had done something deeper than healing it, had tangled their minds in ways even they didn't understand. Sari tried to move again, but the harness still held her gently in place. She turned her head toward Elias, her voice rough. "Your guilt burns like poison." Elias looked at her with tired eyes. "And your hate feels like drowning." Neither meant the words as insults. They were just facts now, shared between broken souls. The system suddenly pulsed with light, a scan moving through their bodies again. They both flinched, but this time it wasn't pain. A warmth flowed through their arms like a river of calm. And then something stranger happened. Suri's pain started to fade. But she realized it wasn't the machine that was doing it. It was him. Elias could feel it too. Her healing was drawing energy from him. Not like stealing, but like sharing. His wounds closed faster than expected, but his muscles ached in return. Sari's breathing slowed, steady and strong. She looked at him. With narrowed eyes, confused. "We're linked now," she whispered. "And not just our memories." They stared at each other in silence, the pod humming gently. Elias finally said, "What happens if we leave this pod?" Sari didn't answer at first. Then she muttered, "I don't know." Her voice had less venom than before. There was exhaustion, yes, but also a strange curiosity. Suddenly, a red light flashed in the pod's upper corner. Emergency. The voice said, "Reactor instability detected. Dinner core failure imminent." Elias cursed under his breath. Of course, it gets worse. The pod jolted as the station shook again. The screen beside them showed an energy surge building nearby, threatening to breach into their level. Sari tried to sit up again, but the pod refused to open. "System override required," it warned. Elias gritted his teeth. "We have to work together." She gave him a sideways glance. "We already are, whether we want it or not." They closed their eyes, focusing on the neural sync the pod had forced between them. Through sheer will, they tapped into the control panel with their shared interface. The lights around them flickered, data streams rushing past like rivers in the dark. Together, they pushed the override, fighting back the system's failsafes. Sweat rolled down Elias's forehead. Tesri growled softly under her breath. Then, the pod hissed, the seal releasing at last. The glass cover lifted slowly, letting in the cold, smoky air from the broken chamber beyond. Neither moved at first, breathing in the real air again. But the bond was still there. They could feel Each other's heartbeat, fear, and confusion. Elias sat up, stretching his stiff limbs. That was insane. Sari followed, her body more relaxed than before, her voice quieter. You touched my soul. Human. He didn't know how to answer. She looked at her own hands, as if unsure they were still hers. Then she looked at him again. Softer this time. We were enemies. Elias nodded slowly. Were. The hallway outside rumbled again, and a loud crash echoed through the station. The moment between them broke, and survival returned to their eyes. They stepped out of the pod. Standing side by side, weapons lost, bodies aching but strangely whole, somewhere above. Their people were still fighting, still killing, still believing the other side deserved nothing but death. But in this forgotten chamber, two warriors, once trained to hate each other, had felt something deeper than peace. Something dangerous, and neither of them knew how to walk away from it. The silence didn't last. Above them, the reactor's groan turned into a deep, metallic roar, echoing through the fractured walls like a warning. Elias glanced toward the far corridor, where blinking red lights cast long shadows across twisted beams. Taziri narrowed her eyes, instinct already kicking in. The core's rupturing, she said, her voice sharper now. We have minutes, maybe less. Without another word, they started moving side by side. Limping through broken walkways and collapsing tunnels, the station had become a death maze, full of falling panels, leaking fire lines, and magnetic surges that bent metal like paper. Elias winced with each step, the bond still linking his nerves with hers. When she stumbled, he felt it. When he tightened his jaw, she sensed it. They reached a control node, a T, half melted but still sparking with life. Elias leaned over it, pulling at wires while Taziri used a cracked display to locate a service lift. She found it, but it was near. The reactor's failing heart. We have to cut through the old turbine corridor, she said, not looking at him. Fastest way. Elias hesitated, then nodded. Let's go. They entered the turbine corridor together, a long chamber full of rotating machinery, thick with heat and fumes. Sparks rained from above, and the floor trembled with each pulse from the reactor. Elias moved first, crawling over pipes while Taziri followed. Her movements surprisingly quiet despite her armor. Halfway through, the corridor shifted violently, and a burning pipe burst near Elias's leg. He shouted, falling hard, Sari. Didn't think she grabbed him and dragged him into a safe spot. He coughed, the smoke choking his lungs. I'm fine, he lied. No, she replied, placing her hand on his chest. You're burning inside. The bond activated again, not from the pod, but from them. Her hand trembled as she focused, and to Elias's shock, the heat in his chest began to ease. She was sharing energy again, this time willingly. He looked at her face, sweat trailing down her cheek, eyes closed in deep focus. She was glowing faintly. And so was he. Then boom, a shockwave knocked them apart. The chamber's side wall cracked open, exposing the pulsing core beyond. Its glow was blinding, like a sun trying to break free. Elias staggered to his feet, pulling Taziri up. No time, he shouted. Run! They sprinted the last stretch, the deck cracking beneath their boots. Sari pushed open the emergency hatch just as the core emitted a low, angry hum. They dove through the hatch and the door slammed shut behind them. A deep rumble followed, then silence. They lay on the ground, gasping, staring at the ceiling. Sweat soaked their skin and their hearts beat as one, fast, wild, and terrified. Elias turned to her, trying to catch his breath. You saved me again. Taziri didn't reply right away, then finally said, You feel lighter now? What? The anger, the guilt, she said softly. It's still there, but it doesn't feel sharp anymore. He looked at her for a long moment, unsure how to answer. Outside, the station still shook, but not as violently. Maybe they had outrun. The worst of it, Tor, maybe not. They had no idea where the others were. Or if anyone had survived, but Elias knew one thing. And so did she. Something had changed, not just in the station, not just in the mission, but in them. They weren't enemies anymore. And that terrified them more than any explosion ever could. The emergency hatch had closed behind them. But the world beyond it was no safer. The corridor was dim, lit only by flickering backup lights, and the air was thick with the scent of burnt wires and old coolant. Taziri pressed her hand against the wall, steadying herself. Elias watched her for a second, then turned his eyes down the passage ahead. It wasn't over, not yet. They walked. In silence for a while, their footsteps echoing softly. Every corner could hold danger-loose wiring. A falling ceiling, or worse, someone from either side. Neither of them said it, but they both knew. If the humans found Suri first, they'd shoot her. If the Vecna patrol found Elias, he'd be executed on the spot. And yet, they didn't. Separate, each step kept them closer than before, not out of trust, but because of something else. The bond still buzzed quietly beneath their skin. Like a silent thread pulling their pulses into rhythm. They didn't understand it fully, but neither of them wanted to break it. When they reached an old storage bay, Elias paused. "We should rest here." Sari hesitated, then gave a short nod. She sat near a broken crate, her knees drawn up, her face unreadable. Elias sat across from her, stretching his sore leg. For a while, they didn't speak, just listened to the hum of the failing power lines. Finally, Elias broke the silence. "Back there. In the pod." "You saw my memories?" Siri's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes." "Did they change anything?" A long pause. Then she said, "They didn't lie." He nodded slowly. "Neither did yours." She looked down at her hands, then at him. "I was taught your kind were weak, loud, emotional, careless." He smiled faintly. "And I thought yours were cold, ruthless, full of pride." They shared a brief moment of quiet understanding. Something impossible just hours ago. Then a voice echoed down the corridor, metallic and sharp. "Target detected." "Lock weapons." Elias shot up, pulling Taziri to her feet. A red targeting laser lit up the far wall. They were surrounded. From the left came human soldiers in worn-out battle gear, led by someone Elias recognized, Captain Rowe. From the right, shadows moved fast, cloaked Vecna scouts stepping into the dim light, blades drawn. It was a standoff. Two sides pointing weapons at each other, and both aiming at them in the center. Elias raised his hands. "Wait, listen," Captain Rowe barked. "You're protecting an enemy, Grant, from the other side." A Vecna warrior hissed. "She's bonded to him. She is no longer one of us." Siri stepped forward. Slow and steady. "None of you understand," she said, voice cold and low. "This is not betrayal, it's survival." Rowe aimed his blaster. "Step away from him, or I'll drop you." Siri moved in front of Elias, placing her body between him and the gun. He froze, shocked. "What are you doing?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But I can't let you die." Blasters and blades twitched. Fingers tensed. Elias stepped beside her now, standing shoulder to shoulder. "No one fires," he called out. "If you want to kill her, you'll have to kill me too." The moment held like a breath, 1 second too long. Then a small movement, someone flinched. A weapon shifted, and chaos erupted. Blaster shots screamed through the air, metal clanged, and shouting filled the corridor. Smoke blinded them both. Someone grabbed Elias. He punched back. Blindly, Taziri spun, dodging a blade, slashing with her claws, roaring with fury. She was not fighting for a side anymore. She was fighting for him. When the dust settled, bodies lay scattered, groaning and still. Most had fled or fallen. Elias leaned against the wall, bleeding again. Tsizeri knelt beside him, her breath shaking, her armor cracked. "Why did you stand in front of me?" he asked, eyes half-lidded. She didn't answer at first, then said, "Because you're part of me now." The bond burned between them, not pain, not fear, something stronger. Something neither of them dared name yet. The smoke still hung in the air like a ghost that wouldn't leave. Tsizeri crouched low beside Elias, her claws trembling as she checked his wound. He tried to speak, but she silenced him with a look, firm but not angry, outside their hiding space. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. The battle was over for now. Elias leaned back, pain pulsing through his ribs. "I'm fine," he said. But even he knew it was a lie. Tsizeri tore a strip from her arm wrap and pressed it against his side. "You humans lie badly," she muttered. And for a moment, Elias smiled, even in pain. Her sarcasm still made him feel alive. They moved again, slow and careful. Deeper into the abandoned sections of the station. Every step was risk, every noise a threat. But something strange was happening. Where they once would have walked with weapons raised, now they walked in sync, no orders, no plan, just instinct pulling them closer. They found shelter in an old cave chamber, half natural, half metal, long forgotten by engineers. Inside, strange crystals pulsed faintly from the walls, giving off warmth. Elias slumped against the wall. Groaning, Tsizeri knelt before him, unstrapping what was left of her armor. "You're bleeding again," she said softly. He looked at her hands, glowing faintly as they hovered over his side. "That trick again," he whispered. "I don't know how," she answered, "but it feels right." She placed her palm over the wound, and he tensed but didn't pull away. Her touch was fire and ice, light and weight. He felt her mind brush against his again. Not like the pod, but gentler, voluntary. She was letting him in, not forcing her way. Images formed Tsizeri as a little girl, hiding behind her mother's legs as soldiers marched by. A voice whispered, "Never trust a human. I'll smile before they strike." The memory faded, and she blinked away the pain. "I was raised on hate," she said. "It's all I knew." Elias didn't speak, but she felt his thought. So was I. The silence between them became something new. Comfort. He reached up barely and brushed a piece of dust from her cheek. She flinched at first, then leaned into his hand. No one would believe this, not their commanders, not their people. Maybe not even themselves. A soft hum echoed through the chamber. The crystals on the wall pulsed brighter, reacting to the bond between them. Tsizeri looked around, confused. "This cavet's alive." Elias nodded slowly. "Old tech. Maybe something before the war?" The warmth spread, not just in the air, but inside their chests, and then it happened. He touched her wrist, and the bond flared. A memory neither had ever seen rushed into their minds. Not his, not hers, but shared, like it had been created between them. In that vision, they stood side by side, older, wiser, walking through a crowd where humans and Vecna laughed together. No weapons, no war, just peace. They pulled back from the vision, both stunned, breathing hard. Tsizeri whispered, "Is this the future?" Elias shook his head slowly. "It's a choice." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. But the way they looked at each other held more truth than any words. She moved closer, resting her head against his shoulder. And he leaned into her, not because he was weak, but because he trusted her strength. For the first time in his life, Elias felt something dangerous and beautiful. Hope. The warmth of the cave faded quickly once they stepped outside, the moment they crossed the broken threshold. The cold air of the ruined station bit into their skin like needles. Elias tried to steady himself, but his body was slowing. Even with the bond's strange healing, he had lost too much blood. Ciri's eyes darted in every direction, alert, protective, tense. They had less than an hour before more patrols arrived, maybe from both sides. There was no safety anymore, not in walls, not in uniforms, not even in silence. The only thing that felt real was the pulsing thread between them, that strange, invisible line that now hummed with every heartbeat they shared. She helped him walk, one arm around his back, the other gripping a stolen blade. They moved through side passages, avoiding open corridors. At one turn, they passed a reflection, in a cracked screen for a moment. Elias didn't recognize the people staring back. One human, barely able to stand, and one alien, covered in scars but steady like stone. Not enemies, not allies, something entirely new. Desiree found an old storage chamber, sealed tight. She sliced through the lock and pushed him inside, then blocked the entrance with debris. Elias sank down, coughing hard. Desiree dropped to her knees beside him, her voice low and sharp. "You're dying." He nodded weakly. "I know, no," she growled. "Not yet." She placed both hands on his chest. Her claws trembling, the bond flared again, stronger this time, hot like a star, deep like gravity. Energy passed between them in waves. Desiree cried out. Her head tilted back, her muscles shaking as the transfer drained her strength. Elias gasped as warmth surged through his limbs. Bones mended, tissue knit back together, but pain came with it sharp. Real, cleansing. He grabbed her wrists, trying to stop her. "Desiree, stop." She didn't move. Her eyes closed tight, lips pressed together in silent focus. Only when his breathing steadied did she finally collapse into his chest, exhausted. They stayed like that for minutes, or hours, neither could tell anymore. Just two bodies, one heartbeat, trapped in a war they no longer believed in. The station trembled again. Not from battle, but from something new. Footsteps echoed outside the chamber, slow, careful, then voices, one deep, guttural, alien. The other familiar human, angry, confused. They were seen heading this way. "Don't engage unless you have to. She's marked as a traitor, and the human. If he's bonded to her, we bring them in dead." Elias felt a spike of rage in his chest, but it wasn't his. It was hers. Ciri's hand gripped his tightly, her voice low and shaking. "They'll kill you first." He looked her in the eyes. "Only a few. Let them." A loud crash shook the entrance. Dust rained down as the metal door buckled. Ciri stood, still weak, but her posture was pure fire. She picked up the blade, held it reverse grip, and turned her head just enough to speak to him without looking away from the door. "Stay behind me." But he stood too, legs shaky but firm. "No," he said, stepping beside her. "We end this together." The bond pulsed between them, no longer just a connection of mind or memory. It had become something else, a weapon, a vow. The door burst open, and light spilled in. They didn't run. They didn't hide. They faced it side by side. Light exploded through the broken door. The attackers stepped in heavily armed, wearing both human and Vecna armor. Not soldiers, not officials. These were private hunters, bounty enforcers, hired by both sides to erase problems like Elias and Desiree. They moved slowly, weapons raised, ready to fire. Elias raised his hands, not out of fear, but to protect her. Desiree didn't step back. She stood tall beside him, her blade low, her stance wide. Every breath between them was shared, every heartbeat matched. The lead hunter barked. "Step away from each other now." Elias didn't blink. "No." Desiree growled low. "You want us dead because we stopped hating each other." Another hunter laughed coldly. "Because you bonded, freaks." The room trembled slightly, not from machines or weapons, but from something deeper. The crystals in the walls flickered again, brighter this time, responding to the charge in the air. The bond wasn't just a livid, was growing. Something ancient in the cave was reacting, listening, waking. A sudden surge of energy pulsed from the floor, blue and gold lights spiraling around Elias and Sari, like a storm made of memory and fire. The hunters stumbled, blinded by the light. There, scanners glitched, weapons lost targeting. Siri felt her muscles tighten, not with pain, but with power. Elias felt no fear, only clarity. They moved. Not as two but as one. Elias dodged left, knocking a blaster from a hand. Siri spun, blade flashing, slicing through another. Attacker's weapon arm. They didn't kill, but they didn't show mercy either. They fought like a force of nature. Fast, silent, untouchable. Within minutes, it was over. The hunters were scattered on the floor, some moaning, some crawling away in fear. One tried to raise a weapon again, but Elias kicked it away and stared down at him, calm and unshaking. "Go back and tell them," he said, voice low. "We're not afraid anymore." The man nodded, shaking, then ran, dragging another with him. The rest fled into the shadows. Silence returned to the chamber. Only the soft hum of the crystals remained. Elias turned to Tazari, breathing hard. "We can't run forever." She nodded slowly. "Then we stop running." He touched her hand again, gently, and the bond shimmered warm, steady, real. A message appeared on a flickering screen nearby. Something neither of them had noticed before. It was in both languages, human and Vecna. Species sync, achieved new pattern, registered integration model. Active. Tazari read it twice, then looked at him. "Do you know what this means?" Elias smiled. "We're not the first to bond like this." "No," she said quietly. "But maybe we're the first not to hide it." They left the chamber together, walking through the ashes of war. Where once they saw only enemies, now they saw possibility. The bond didn't just heal wounds, it revealed truth. That peace was possible. That love was stronger than orders. That even to enemies, bound by blood and loss, could find something worth fighting for together. And so they disappeared from the war reports, vanished from the kill lists. But legends spread across both sides of a human and a Vecna warrior who walked into battle as enemies and walked out as one.